Don't scroll. You've walked past a skyscraper under construction, looked up, seen that massive crane towering above everything, arms stretching across the sky like it owns the city. And then one day, the building is finished. The crane is gone. You never saw it leave. You never asked how. Because somewhere between the foundation and the finished floor, a machine the size of a building appeared from nowhere, built something impossible, and then vanished without a trace. That's not construction. That's a magic trick. And like every magic trick, the method is more disturbing than the illusion.
Here is what nobody tells you. Tower cranes don't get lifted to the top of skyscrapers. They climb there themselves, section by section, floor by floor, growing taller as the building grows beneath them. And when the job is done, they don't get lowered down either. They build the very machine that destroys them. They construct their own executioner, piece by piece, bolt by bolt, and then they disappear. Machiavelli once wrote that the most dangerous man is the one who builds the instrument of his own destruction and calls it strategy. The tower crane has been doing exactly that for over a century.
Before the tower crane, skyscrapers were impossible. Not difficult. Impossible. You cannot build what you cannot reach. And no human arm, no rope system, no pulley arrangement could lift steel beams and concrete loads 50 stories into the sky with the precision modern construction demands. The first true tower crane emerged in Germany in the early 1900s. Engineers needed a machine that could grow with the structure it was building, something that didn't need to be taller than the building before construction began, something that could start small and become enormous. What they designed changed the skyline of every city on Earth. A crane that builds itself, that climbs using nothing but its own mechanical strength, that anchors itself to the very building it is creating, using the structure as its spine. From that moment, every skyscraper you have ever seen was built by a machine that most people have never thought about once.
How it gets up there. Here is where the intelligence of the design becomes almost unsettling. A tower crane does not arrive at a construction site fully assembled. It arrives in pieces, transported on flatbed trucks, each section bolted together on the ground by a smaller mobile crane. The base is first, a massive concrete foundation, engineered specifically for that crane on that site, poured weeks in advance. Not just a slab, a calculated structure designed to absorb forces that would collapse anything ordinary. Then the mast goes up, section by section, the first few floors of height built using mobile cranes on the ground. And then the crane takes over. Here is the part that stops people. The tower crane uses a climbing frame, a hydraulic steel sheath that wraps around the mast like a fist. When the crane needs to grow taller, it does something that should not be possible. It lifts itself.
The hydraulic jacks inside the climbing frame push the entire upper section of the crane. The arm, the cab, the motor, everything. Upward. Just enough space to slide a new mast section underneath. Workers bolt it in. The crane releases, settles onto the new section. And now, it is taller. This process repeats every time the building rises another 20 to 30 feet. The crane grows with the building. Anchored to it by steel collars bolted directly into the structure every few floors, using the building itself as a stabilizing spine. The crane and the building rise together, inseparable, each one making the other possible. The two methods. There are two ways a tower crane climbs. Both reveal something different about how engineers think about power in confined spaces. The first is external climbing. The crane stands beside the building, its base fixed in the ground, its body anchored to the exterior walls as it rises. The arm reaches over the top.
the building grows around and past it. This method is fastest, but it requires space around the structure and is vulnerable to wind at extreme heights. The second is internal climbing. The crane stands inside the building, in a central shaft, an open core left specifically for this purpose. It climbs upward through the interior as floors are built around it. When the building is complete, the crane is trapped inside a finished structure with no way out. And this is where the real intelligence begins. The self-destruction. Here is the question nobody asks until it's too late. If the crane climbed up inside the building, how does it come back down? The answer is one of the most quietly brilliant engineering solutions in construction history. The crane builds its own replacement. Before it begins dismantling itself, the tower crane lifts a smaller crane, called a derrick, up to the rooftop. It bolts this derrick to the building's roof structure, secures it completely. Then, the tower crane begins taking itself apart, section by section, piece by piece. And the derrick, the machine the tower crane just installed, lowers each piece down. The crane builds the instrument of its own removal, positions it perfectly, and then surrenders itself to it completely. When the tower crane is gone, the derrick remains, until the building maintenance unit, a permanent cradle system built into the finished skyscraper, lowers the derrick's pieces down through the construction elevator. And then, there is nothing. The building stands. The sky is clear. And no one who walks past it will ever think about what happened 400 feet above their head. The external climbers exit.
External climbing cranes exit differently, and more dramatically. Because they are anchored to the outside of the building, they can reverse the climbing process. The hydraulic frame lowers them, section by section, back toward the ground. Each mast piece removed as the crane descends, until finally, the mobile cranes on the ground can reach the remaining sections and dismantle the base. The crane that rose beside the building descends beside it, slowly, methodically, vanishing the way it arrived. When buildings are too tall for either, the Burj Khalifa, One World Trade Center, the tallest structures humans have ever built. At these heights, even the most powerful cranes and derricks reach their limits. The sections are too heavy, the cables too long, the logistics too complex for standard methods. So engineers bring in a different weapon entirely. Heavy lift helicopters. Military-grade aircraft hover beside the building at 1,500 feet. Workers attach crane sections to the helicopter's load line. The helicopter lifts them one by one and lowers them to the ground below. It took 3 weeks to remove the final tower crane from the Burj Khalifa. 3 weeks of helicopter operations, dozens of lifts, hundreds of workers coordinating through radio at heights where the air itself is thin. That is what it costs to undo what took years to build.
Now, let the image sit with you for a moment. A machine climbs to the top of the world using nothing but its own strength. It builds something that will outlast it by centuries. And then, when the work is done, it builds the very device that will take it apart, lowers itself into pieces, and disappears. No ceremony, no recognition, no mark left behind. Machiavelli wrote that the most powerful men are not those who are remembered, but those without whom nothing would have been possible. The ones whose absence is felt, but whose presence was never celebrated. The tower crane is the most powerful machine on any construction site. The tallest, the most critical, the one thing that makes everything else possible. And when the building is finished, it is erased completely. That is not tragedy. That is mastery. Because the measure of true power is not what remains of you when you are gone. It is what cannot exist without what you built while you were here. Every skyscraper standing in every city on Earth is proof of something that no longer exists. A machine that climbed, built, and then chose to disappear.
Here is what this means beyond the construction site.
Every major city skyline you have ever admired was built by a system most people cannot name. The cranes that made those buildings possible have been completely erased from the finished product. Not by accident, but by design. The Burj Khalifa, the Empire State Building, the One World Trade Center, the Shard in London, the Petronas Towers in Malaysia. Every one of them was built by tower cranes that climbed their way to the top and then vanished. And right now, in cities across the world, new cranes are climbing, growing taller every week, anchoring themselves to structures that don't exist yet, building things that will still stand 200 years from now, while the cranes themselves will be gone before the paint dries.
You will never look at a construction crane the same way again. Not after understanding that it climbed there alone, that it anchored itself to the very structure it was building, that it built its own replacement, that it lowered itself into pieces and disappeared without a trace. The building gets the skyline. The building gets the name. The building gets the history. The crane gets nothing. And that is precisely why it was powerful.